All right, we're back for another Caveman's Corner. My co-host Ray, I don't know where he's at, so we don't have a good intro today. He's the one that plays the Mexican music. Today we're going to talk about fencing. Since we're a combat sports broadcast, I brought in a sort of expert in the field, Nels Thompson. How you doing, Nels?
I'm doing great.
I met this guy at the gym, and he's kind of a mess. He's all sweaty. He had some beard growing in. Today he comes on my podcast, and I don't even recognize him. Got a clean cut, haircut, clean shaven. He looks like 10 pounds lighter. What's going on, man?
Everything's good. I actually, since we talked, I actually went back and started fencing. It kind of inspired me to. I had taken some time off, but I went back to the club.
That's awesome, man. So what kind of fencing do you do? I know there's a couple different types. One, you use battle swords and you have body armor on, right?
Well, that
like
is,
on TV?
that is out there. That's not the kind that is the Olympic style fencing. So I fence epee. It's one of the weapons that they use in the Olympics. There is a style that people use, the broadswords, and that's a different sport entirely. The fencing that I do is with the flexible blades that you just hit with the tip, and it's what you see that's on the Olympics every 4 years.
That's awesome, man. I'm going to start the podcast out with this before we get too serious. I've loved fencing ever since I saw Princess Bride, to be honest with you. That was one of my favorite movies of all time. That had to really affect fencing.
Oh, everybody! You go to a fencing club and everybody quotes Princess Bride. Everybody loves it. It's the movies that got everybody interested in fencing. Nobody watches Olympic fencing. You watch movies and you see sword fencing, and that's why people want to fence. It's awesome.
Is it more like that kind of style fencing? Is there a lot of parrying back and forth, like volleying? You'd say I don't know what it's called.
There's actually not a lot of it when you're actually in a bout. In a bout, the action is over very quickly because you're going just until somebody touches. So when you were talking before, I think it's a little bit like boxing, where
right.
If you're going to score when somebody hits, somebody comes together, boom, 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 and somebody hits, now that's a point.
Right.
So,
I mean, you see boxing every time. You see how quick it is for one person to touch another person. It's very quick.
That's right. That's basically what fencing is. Time after time, a bout goes to 15 touches. First one to 15 wins, and the action of any given touch might just be 2 or 3 or 4 clicks of the blade, and then one person hits the other person, gets the touch.
Right. So it's almost like you're sparring, not sparring, but almost like you're fighting with katanas, like one strike, one kill kind of stuff. Most of my listeners are into martial arts, so they're probably more familiar with sword combat. And if you think katana combat, where you parry and slice, that's pretty much I imagine fencing would be.
That's right. It can be very direct. It can be sometimes you hit on the direct attack, and then a lot of actions are just someone parries that first attack and strikes right back, and that's a touch awarded. Yeah.
So one really good thing about fencing that makes it athletic that I kind of like is you kind of fight. It was almost like on a carpet. It looks like when they fight.
Yeah.
What is that flooring actually? Is it carpet?
It's actually metal, and it conducts. In a competition, you ideally will have a metal strip because when it's scored electronically, and when you hit the floor, you don't want it to go off. You don't want the referee to think that it was a touch on the other person's body. So they actually, when you see Olympic fencing, they're fencing on a conductive metal strip.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. I always thought the referee awarded the points.
That you can, we call that dry fencing. Hardly anybody does that anymore. You go to a club, sometimes you might have to fence without the electronic stuff, but if you ever give it a shot, you got to fence electronically. It's a totally different experience because really, really light touches are scored, and that's a really great feeling when you're fencing to have those touches scored. The very light touches that a referee might not be able to see. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's crazy. I always imagined there'd be a lot of fighting. It seems so. I always thought just because it was the Olympics they never fought, but I can see now if it was. Oh, jeez, what a rookie! I have my phone on, and I did the podcast rookie mistake. I had it go off. Ah, you're fixing your phone right now. Yeah, it was my wife. I just texted her. I was like, I'm having that fencing guy on. She's like, the guy you met at the gym? That's kind of weird. But that's how podcasts work. You just meet people and you get it going. To continue my thought, I always thought that when they were fencing that it was just such a high level that they respected each other. That's why they didn't argue with the referee when they called points.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
It's definitely got that history to it, that there's a lot of deference to the referee. You salute each other and you salute the referee. There's rules that you're not allowed to be coached while you're there. And it is, people say that it's kind of the European martial art that people are taught. We are taught with the respect for going onto the strip and following all the rules and abiding by the referee's decisions.
So I know there's 3 styles of fencing because we talked before the podcast. I remember this from the gym, actually. I met this guy, I was cutting weight, and I was sitting in the sauna, and we just started talking about fencing. It was super cool. I learned a lot, man. So I want to bring some of this knowledge to you guys. I thought it was really cool, so I thought it would be a good podcast. There's 3 different types of fencing. There's epee, and what are the other 2?
Yeah, epee, foil, and saber.
Epee, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So foil is the one that most people begin with, and it's probably has the most practitioners. When you see the Olympics, foil might be the most common weapon that you see. It's got rules of right of way. So you hit with only the point. It's very flexible blade, and when you start an attack, you're allowed to finish that attack. So if your opponent counterattacks you and hits, but you finish your attack, you actually get the point. So it enforces rules of training, if you will. So it makes you defend yourself if you're attacked first. Then you have to defend yourself, and then you have to parry the other guy's attack, and then you can hit.
I like it. Sounds like it rewards aggression. I want to be the first guy off.
It does. It does. Or it rewards laying a trap. Mm-hmm. That's right. And it's the really cool thing about foil fencing, and the same goes for saber, we'll get to in a second, is it's very cerebral in that way, that you can plan an action, you can try to trap someone into an attack, and then you can parry and counterattack them. So you can come back from behind in foil fencing, but in epee, there's no rules of right of way, and the whole body is target. I don't think I mentioned in foil the torso is target. That's the only portion you hit off the torso. You hit on the arm, you hit on the mask. It's not a touch. It stops the action, but not a touch. Epee, the whole body is target, and that's what I like. I like to fence epee because to me it's the most pure combat sport.
So the hands count?
The hand, yep. A beautiful touch on epee is to hit somebody on the hand, or it's no fun to get hit on the hand.
Yeah, that probably sucks. Even with the gloves on, that probably sucks.
Yeah, you can really get hit on the knuckle because the blades are a little flexible, and so because the hand is target in epee, a lot of times fencers will try to flick just a little bit over the top of the bell guard and hit you on the hand there. You can get hit on the knuckle pretty hard.
So when you think about epee, that's the one with the big bell guard, and the bell guard is kind of like where I would say where the hilt of the sword meets the blade. Usually there's a cover over that, and that would be...
Yeah, that's right. So the bell guard is, if you see a movie, it'd probably be really fancy. It's right now next to the hand, or maybe in a movie you might see a sword, and it's not a circle that covers up the full hand. But in the sport of fencing, that it's a round guard that protects you. Protects the hand.
And then for the different swords, is a bell guard different as well?
The bell guard's a little bit different. It's especially different for saber because saber is a cutting action where you don't actually have a sharp. Obviously, none of these are sharp. But in saber, you can hit with the side of the blade. So sabers have got a bell guard that comes down over the fist and connects down at the bottom of the pommel on your hand. So your knuckles are covered by the bell guard.
So like saber. Brass knuckles without going through all the fingers.
That's right. Yep. Because a saber is the head is target, and they'll chop to the head. So they'll come overhand at you and chop to the head, and the saberist will lift their hand up to block that. And the bell guard covers those knuckles to prevent them from getting hit that way, and they can parry, and then the saberist can counterattack. And that's a really common counterattack action in saber.
I don't think I've ever seen it. I have to watch the video you sent me. I know you sent me a video of it, and I didn't watch it because I suck.
Saber is, I hate to say this because I love epee, but saber is probably the most fun to watch for beginners because they run up and down the strip practically. Basically, saber is the easiest one to hit the other person with. So when you start to be attacked in saber, you better get the hell out of there, or you better defend yourself because they can come at you and they can hit you overhand, or they can thrust, or they can come at you sideways. There's just a ton of ways for them to hit you. You're in great danger when you're being attacked in saber. So saberists go up and down the strip trying to make sure that they don't get hit with that first attack. And then when that first attack fails, then the one guy will chase the other one back down the strip. So it has the most action up and down the strip, and it's a lot of fun. You can find Olympic videos of saber or World Championship saber contests. They got super slow-mo and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun to watch.
That's crazy. And you're talking about the strip. All 3 styles fight on the same strip, right? The same dimension strip?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so you don't, you're just up and down one strip. It's 1.5 meters wide, I think. If you go off the strip, then they stop the action. Maybe they give the other person a meter of territory, and if you run off the strip at the back, then you lose the point. So you have to stay within that space. If you went off the strip, you give up a meter, and you keep giving up a meter. Eventually, you go off. So
yeah, one thing I relate everything I watch to my sport fighting. MMA. And I noticed how well they're timing in and out to each other. So they're always moving back and forth with each other when you watch good fencers move. And obviously it's because they can't go circle off to the side. And that's what develops such an athletic style. Like, they're so good at distancing and going forward and retreating back in a straight line. It's actually pretty fascinating to watch the footwork. And really high level fencing.
Yeah, we talked earlier about whether or not there were a lot of great actions with the sword in fencing. But like any of the other combat sports, timing and distance are really the factors that make you successful at it. So that footwork, where they're going chasing each other up and down the strip, I mean, they're not just they're not just messing around. They're trying to get an advantage. They're trying to draw an attack on favorable terms so they can counter it, or they're trying to get the distance to the point where they can successfully land. And timing and distance is everything. I would imagine, I've never boxed, but I would imagine it must be really similar. That the same action that isn't at the right timing or distance will fail, but you get to the right timing and distance, you outwork the person with your feet, and then you can land your touch.
Yeah, boxing is a little bit more intricate with the footwork because they make the angles as well. So like fencing, you're just in and out. Boxing is like in and out on a 360-degree circle as well. So like you're always trying to make an angle where you can hit him with your power hand, he can't hit you with his power hand, So when you're boxing, you're always trying to step away from his right hand so you can land your right hand.
That makes sense. Yeah, with fencing, there's a little bit of angles that you might play, but you're absolutely right. You don't turn around. You're not going around to the other side, and you're only hitting, of course, with the lead as well. There's nothing to be gained by that.
Are you penalized for going off the mat or off the strip?
Usually not. Usually that's just in the course of action, and they just call a halt. But if they feel it's done deliberately or it's done to avoid a touch, because once you go off the strip, then they won't avoid a touch. So you could go off the strip because you were in a bad situation, and they can penalize you for that if they feel you've done it deliberately.
You gotta be like Dominic Hasek and flip the net over every time they get by you.
Right. There's it's a sport, so there is some of that goes on. I mean, do I ever go off the strip to avoid a touch? Yeah, sure I do. Do I get penalized for it all the time? No.
So if you get penalized, do you lose a point, or is it just like a warning, or how does the penalties work?
You can get a warning, and then they do a yellow card, and then a second one is a point, and then very rare you can get straight red cards, which would be a point, and extremely rare would be gross sportsmanship violation. You can get a black card.
No, it's just like kicking someone in dingling in MMA. You get a free one, you might as well use it.
Yeah.
Gotta step off the mat.
That would black card you.
Well, you guys can't kick, but we can kick, so we make it look like a little bit of an accident. We're all good. You gotta press the rules when you get a little bit tired.
Yeah.
Are the swords standard size? Are they all measured and stuff before you compete? I've been having a longer sword, I have a little bit longer touch. I mean,
it's funny. I don't think they are all the same size, but they're manufactured, so you're not going to get one that's a different size. Maybe at the Olympics they actually measure the size just to be sure, but they do measure the weight. Basically, at the end of the point of the weapon has got a little spring-loaded tip. So this is why it's so great defense when it's scored electronically instead of scored by referees watching it. That when you hit someone with that weapon, it takes, I think it's only 500 grams of pressure for a foil to score 750 grams, I think it is, for epee. And
I don't really understand how much of a touch that is.
Not much.
750 grams of weight is not much at all. So
yeah, right.
Like dropping a penny, pretty much.
It's probably about like a soda can, probably. Yeah, probably about like that much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, my grams to ounces is not so good.
Yeah. So you'd be surprised how easy it is. But except sometimes when you're fencing, you think you've hit, and you'd be surprised how hard it is. But they test that with weight. So before a bout, they test a couple of things. They'll test, and the most critical one is that the spring inside the tip has got to push the weight back up. And if they put the weight on and the light doesn't go off to show that you stop scoring, then they won't allow you to fence with that weapon. And the other thing they test is they make sure that there's enough travel in the spring. So it has to travel a certain distance before it will register the touch. And if people shim it really, really fine, they'll be that weapon would be disqualified.
Right, because it makes the touches actually work easier, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so they want a certain amount of travel and a certain amount of force to
They don't
to
really
score
measure
a
the
touch.
length, huh? So if I made a custom epee for you,
That would be
they're
very,
pretty
very
hooked
tough.
up, make it another couple inches longer.
It'd be very tough because it'd be very tough to pass off a homemade one because they're manufactured with grooves down the center, and you put wires in them, and the tip screws into these things. It'd be very, very tough to come up with your own. And technically, you do need to fence with weapons that are manufactured to the right specification. They're stamped by the International Fencing Association. So,
well, so we can't really cheat.
Can't really do it.
I am a machinist. I mean, we could probably make you something pretty cool.
People do fence with different flexibilities. The lengths are the same, but sometimes people fence with something they prefer a really flexible weapon. Of course, that's a problem because the point wanders on you a little bit if it's really flexible. If you're trying to hit after moving the weapon around and that point is wobbling a little bit, you're going to be a little bit less accurate. But
you might also have like certain techniques, correct?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Like bend the blade to come over to guard.
Yeah, exactly. They a flick, and sometimes fencers will all actually flick and hit you in the back because the bodies are coming close together and their hand will go up and they'll flick down and hit you on the back. That's an expert technique. I don't recommend people trying that.
Is that legal?
It's totally legal.
So the back's a legal target too.
Back is a legal target.
So
Absolutely.
you can't turn around and run away.
That's right. Yeah.
I kind of like that, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing thing. I can't imagine how that developed. Do you have any idea how, like, all these styles developed and how where the rules came from?
My understanding is that it was basically a training technique for people who would fight with swords and especially with sabers, for example, cavalry back in the old days. And it doesn't resemble actual combat very much, but especially in saber, the techniques used would be the kinds of parries that you would use to defend yourself or the kind of actions that you would use to hit directly. So I think that it was training for military officers, military people, but I think it developed pretty quickly into something that was done for dueling. That's probably the most common use of actual fencing was in dueling.
Like they duel and then like with real swords instead of touches?
Yeah, there's actual video because dueling went out of favor, into the 20th century.
We had presidents that duel, Jesus Christ, but they used guns because they weren't really tough.
Yeah, there's video of a Parisian editor and politician who insulted one another, and they're actually fencing with epées. And they're when you're not doing it for the sport. I mean, for the sport, you go hard. Mm-hmm. You go deep. You want to hit. You try to hit the arm, and if you miss the arm, you want to hit the body. So the actions are very, very aggressive in sport fencing. But when you watch this duel, and there's video of it, you could look at it out there. When you watch this duel, they're standing there holding their arms way out, and they're just kind of trying to poke each other on the arm because nobody wants to risk that you would go deep enough and actually have that weapon penetrate into your body. So it was, they.
Did anyone die in the video?
No, not in that. No, they would do, they would do to First Blood. Like I understand that they would put like spiked tips on some of these weapons when they would duel. And so if it just drew blood, it was your honor was satisfied if you had dueled and then
poison a tip.
Yeah, yeah. I think dueling was. I don't imagine that there was much cheating in dueling because the whole concept was of honor. And so they would have seconds, and there was a whole formality of, if you felt as though your wife had been offended or insulted or something, someone would say, well, I have to have satisfaction. And then, two guys would get together, they would shoot each other or they would fence one another, and then their honor was satisfied, win, lose, or draw. But of course, not too often probably with the fencing because I think they just went to blood. But I mean, there were people who they would get infections and they would die. So it was definitely a dueling weapon, but that's hopefully long gone now. Yeah, you might get into that, but those of us that do sport fencing, we're not into the harder combat sports.
I think my favorite weapon, my favorite sword to fight with would be the katana. It's heavy enough to chop parts off and sharp enough to do a lot of damage. It's not, like I could smash that your thing and probably break it.
Is that a samurai sword? Is that what the katana is, or?
Yeah, actually, hang on one second. I'll go grab mine out of the room. Should have it in the podcast anyway. Should just pause it now. All right, sorry about that. I ran to my bedroom and I grabbed a sword. So this is a samurai sword. This is just a cheap replica of one. Honestly, it wouldn't be one that I'd ever use because it'd break because it doesn't have a full tang. So basically, the sword just ends right here at the crossguard. But this would be like a samurai sword or a katana, and that's a much more devastating weapon, I think.
Oh, far more. Yeah, yeah. This would be similar, not identical, probably to the actual saber that cavalry officers would have
Right.
used. Yeah. Is this used in kendo? But you use a wooden one, am I
Yeah,
right?
in
the
kendo they use a
sport?
wooden one. It's like 4 pieces of bamboo tied together with string, and they whack you with it, and that thing sucks. But it's supposed to replicate this a little bit. But this one's like got a curved blade, and the kendo stick's pretty straight.
Yeah.
I never really got too deep into kendo enough to know if it was supposed to represent a katana, but this would be the sword that they would use in that time period.
I saw a really super interesting video about the steel technology that went into making these back.
When they
150,
folded the
200 years
steel.
ago. Yeah, and they would pound it, and they did like an X-ray cross section of these things, and they were talking about how hard it is. They made these things with old charcoal kilns, and
Right.
but they had a special furnace that would get it to super hot temperatures, so they could make the steel of this hardness. And apparently, when they tempered it, they put it into, I don't know if it was oil or water or whatever. The curve comes because when it hardens, the difference in the material is narrower on one side and thicker on the other one causes that little curve. And I also read that the curve contributes to its slicing capability for this samurai sword. That when you make a straight chop, if the blade isn't curved,
Right.
you're not doing any slicing.
Yeah,
And
because
so
you need a curve for it to go through.
yeah. So these are deadly weapons, and this would, a weapon like this would just, you would easily break off any of the weapons that we use at the Tang.
Yeah.
But our weapons do break from time to time, and it's one of the most dangerous things that happens in fencing is when the weapon breaks, because it could break off and it could be a little sharp, and and so we wear Kevlar equipment, and the masks are to a certain standard. And they had to improve them, actually. There has been a death in modern fencing, like in the early 1900s.
From a face wound?
Yeah.
Ouch.
A blade broke, apparently, and went through, I believe it was right through a mask. Or it may have been through the chest. I actually forget exactly where it was.
Because those masks
look
look like they're pretty sturdy.
They are. Yeah, they are. The danger thing would be if it broke off to a fine, if it splintered, and then you get a thin wedge that goes into that mesh, and then would widen it and could hit you in the face. So that's another thing they test before a competition is they take this little point and they press it in really hard. It stands up. Those things are manufactured. They must be really well, because you put a lot of force onto this thing, and if it slides in between the mesh, you can't fence with that mask. One of the dumbest things people can do is try to cheat that pre-match test.
Yeah, nothing cool ever happened with this. I just cut a couple kids' birthday cakes with it. But
That's cool.
I love swords, man, and I think this one's cool. I wanted to get one like you're talking about with not just a full Tang sword, but an official folded sword. But to order like one from Japan, it's like $1,800.
Oh yeah, wow.
That's the cheapest one I found, and that's like used from some guy.
Yeah, really. The kimonos and those weapons. I mean, they're. I lived in Japan briefly. I was actually in the Navy. And
Wow, that's awesome, man!
Yeah.
I should have sent you to get me a sword. Save me a shipping.
yeah,
Texas.
I don't. I think they're expensive over there too. That's what I remember was some of the authentic things, just like anywhere else. The authentic things, they're pricey.
I mean, you can get a real sword. I mean, this is stainless steel too. It's not even like what you really want a sword made out of. But you can get a full Tang sword or something for a couple $100. But I want one that was like handmade, like forged and stuff. I knew a guy that was forged them for a while, but his tried to make me one, but it sucked. So I told him to keep it.
Do you do any kendo still, or this a long time ago? Or
That was when I was in college. I was very fascinated by it in high school because I got super into karate. And then I ran into a guy in college that was really, really good at kendo. So I started doing kendo with him, and I went to a club, and he used to beat the crap out of me, dude. I left bleeding so many times, but it was really, really fun. And I really like kendo. It's very aggressive, and they really try and whack you on the hands a lot.
Yeah. Is that even a strategy? Like you're trying to actually hurt so that a person will drop the weapon or
I don't
something?
know. The hands score. So
The
like
hands
if
score,
you
gotcha.
hit the hand on the hand, it scores, and it hurts.
Yeah. Right.
It hurts a lot.
Yeah.
And their equipment is expensive because you're supposed to have the official kendo like gear, and it's a couple $100 just for the chest piece.
Yeah, it's like breastplate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like really, it's not like just some Kevlar armor you can get. It's something that's like crafted and it's expensive. I borrowed it when I used it, but it didn't fit right. So I'm sure it'd be a lot cooler if I had stuff that fit. But I had a lot of fun with it. I mean,
In fencing, you get bruised sometimes. When I was fencing actively, you end up with marks all over your arm and your chest, your leading arm, and your chest, maybe around your shoulder. They kind of look like hickeys. You just kind of because you get the weapon come in, it's blunt, and it'll just come in and like scratch you a little bit through the clothing. But that's about as serious. So you get bruised maybe, but not like you guys, not like you guys fighters.
yeah, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
Usually you get hit hard enough, you don't feel it for until you go home. Then it sucks. The worst part is in the shower when all the cuts get hit with the hot water. The brush burns are the worst from the wrestling part, I would say. I think, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, occasionally you get a little opening of the skin when you fence too.
Yeah.
And that stings a little bit, but it's really nothing like what you guys go through.
Yeah,
Saber, they say with saber, because you have a cutting action, so you can whip the blade around to strike the target, and sometimes guys will get stung pretty good with the saber.
I can imagine that would suck. And I would be punching with the crossguard too.
Well, that's and
Is that a legal technique?
Oh. That is not a legal technique.
I like that.
You're not the first one to ask. But they watch for anything that would be contact to the head. It's like protecting NFL quarterbacks.
So you can't like trip or anything either. Like you can't like tie up the feet to score or.
No, it is totally. It is totally designed so that it is only about the point and the action, and there's no other physical combat to it other than just trying to put the point on the other person.
So, this may sound crazy. I'm old and I'm not really set in my ways, but I think this would be a great way to develop some footwork and some timing for MMA. So, if you had a place to go to, where would you recommend?
The club in town here, Les Amis, Lesamis.
I'm glad you spelled that because that French stuff's not going to work so good with my listening audience for sure.
You'll hear French, by the way, if you watch videos on it. In the Olympics, French is the official language of fencing. But Les Amis here in town, they have a beginner's class. They've got a beginner's class starting on the 9th of January. I think it's like $90, and you don't have to get any equipment. You can borrow the club's equipment. It goes like 8 weeks, and any beginner is welcome. Intermediate class follows. I think the classes are on Wednesdays at 6:00, but we can double check that.
How many classes a week?
There's a couple of sessions a week with the club, and then the class meets once a week for 8 weeks. But while people are taking the class, then they can come to the club.
That's pretty cheap.
It is. It's a good deal. It's a good deal to give it a try for people. You don't have to buy any equipment. Come on in.
Just a little bit over $10 a lesson. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, and they're probably they're not there's not a ton of people that are always trying out fencing. If you come to a beginner's class, you're probably going to be one of 4 people and thereabouts. Yeah.
What if there's like a ringer guy that's been fencing 20 years, comes to beginner classes to tool us up?
Yeah, then that's pretty obvious.
Does that happen a lot?
No, I think the ringer doesn't want to go fence with the beginners, so the ringer would want to fence with the rest of us an hour later. So
right,
yeah.
I think that it would probably suck to fence with beginners. It's like a white belt in jiu-jitsu. They're always doing weird stuff and trying to hurt you. Like new fencers probably like do illegal strikes and all kinds of weird stuff if you fence with them.
New fencers will tend to hit kind of hard because ideally you're making a very smooth action. Ideally, you advance and you extend the blade and then you hit. But if you're not in control, what do? Your hand goes back and forth, so you end up with a punching motion even though you don't really mean to. So beginner fencers can be kind of painful to fence because they can hit you pretty hard. And then the worst thing is, of course, it might be half a second after you've already hit them. But so you have a beautiful touch. You won the point, and then bam, you get it.
Yeah, that's how it is rolling white belts if you ever do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You should try that sometime too. You're looking young and svelte now. Now it's time to get on the mat.
Oh man. I'm getting old and fat, so I gotta do something.
You seriously look like you lost 10 pounds since I seen you at the gym.
Well, I haven't, but I did go back and begin to fence again. So
might be the haircut too.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
You look great.
Yeah, thanks.
I noticed every time you're showing some sort of fencing technique, you're always using your right hand. Are you right-handed?
I am right-handed.
So you lead with your dominant hand in fencing then?
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Dominant leg and dominant hand. I mean, so when you most people have probably seen fencers. They stand with the one hand is up, their backhand is up, kind of by their head, and then they stand in a stance where their front foot is pointed towards the opponent, and then they're holding the weapon out with the same hand. So it kind of, it's kind of a dainty looking stance in the diagrams from 100 years ago and a couple hundred years ago.
Why do you have the other hand up, the left hand, like towards your hand?
If you cover target with it, you can be penalized for it. Also, the natural thing that you want to do just for maximum acceleration is that when you go forward with your dominant hand, so when I go forward with my right hand and my right foot, I throw my left one back, because it just helps you make that more efficient action, kind of, like when you're running and you
strain your body out. So you're going from square with the target to extend it out.
Yeah.
It shortens your target range.
It's conservation. Too. Yeah, conservation of momentum, that anything I throw backwards is going to help me go forward. It's going to contribute to my forward acceleration. So you hold that hand up, and then it's just you throw that hand back as you go forward. It keeps it out of harm's way, so it can't be hit, because once you get into an action, I fence epee, so the whole body is target. So I don't want to get hit on that backhand. It's one of the worst feelings in the world to get hit on the backhand in epee. What the heck was I doing that for?
I'm not gonna lie, I may have made a few off-color homosexual jokes about the way people stand in fencing. That's all right. I do a sport where we wear spandex and roll around with each other on the floor. So
that's right.
Each sport's got its own little thing, man. I don't don't take any offense to it.
None taken. Yeah, it's interesting to see the old diagrams. You see these old diagrams, and they're trying to document. I mean, these are old drawings of different defensive positions or attacking positions, and it looks like they're not even holding the weapon sometimes, because they're just not even really drawn to a realistic scale. You've got a guy in knickers, and he's got a hat on, and he's got his hand out, and his wrist is down, and he's deflecting a blade. But then when you see Olympic fencers, and they're standing on the strip, they're ready to go, they're all business. It's really, really cool. I mean, I love watching videos of top level fencing. The body control that they have, and the aggression the controlled aggression that they come after each other with is really, really, really amazing.
I like the whole vibe of it too. It's so respectful at times. It reminds me of Muay Thai, like the Muay Thai kickboxing or traditional Muay Thai kickboxing. They go after each other, and they're so respectful towards each other, but they're trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how I imagine this, since that's probably how it originally started. We're really trying to kill each other, but we're going to have a lot of honor. Yeah,
it's got that tradition of dueling, so it came out of that tradition of honor. There's, I read a book, I forget who it was. There was some famous, I think it was Hungarian fencer, from the 1950s or 1940s, who had come out of the tradition where they were dueling. And there are people who believe that when dueling went away, society became less polite, because you could insult people without ever paying a price.
That's so funny, because I don't know how much you watch hockey, but they say the same thing about hockey. Once they put the instigator in, and they really took out fighting, kind of like the game got more chippier and dirty, and guys are doing stick work on each other. It's not like the old days where, like, if there's a big hit or you stuck someone, your goon's going to come out and beat up whoever did it.
I'm a big hockey fan, and I think it was just in the Sabres game that Nathan Beaulieu came after one of the Flyers players. At the end of the game, they'd hit somebody. It was a legal hit, came after him. Personally, I don't like that in the sport, and one of the reasons that I think one of the things I'm probably in the minority in this podcast here, but what I really like about top level sport is when you got to subordinate that instinct to go harm the other person to the rules. So in fencing, if you're constantly being respectful to the ref and constantly being respectful to your opponent, then that instinct that you might have that you've just been stung or you don't like what happened, that I think that's the best of sport is when we don't go outside. I remember the Tyson Holyfield fight, which the thing that was so discouraging about that was that Tyson gave into that instinct to do harm. And when you at the best of sport and the best of one-on-one sport, there's that instinct, but you're sublimating that instinct within the rules of the game. And So whether it's boxing or whether it's fencing or whether it's hockey, I wish extracurricular stuff would come out of it. And
Tyson might be a little bit hungry, but here,
Yeah.
let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. The Tyson thing is not going to really fit my theory because that's just a little bit out there. But in a team sport, it's much more different than individual sports. So when we're conducting ourselves, if I was fencing you or you were fighting me, and we're both following the rules, there's no reason for either of us to get upset. You honorably beat me. But if we're playing a team sport where it's important for me to be a member of the team and we're a team together, if you come after one of my players and you do something that I think, it doesn't even have to be against the rules, something I consider cheap, I may try and take you out or do some damage to you because you've hurt one of my players, one of my team. It's like that gang mentality in team sports. You see that more in team sports like football and hockey and, gang warfare kind of. It's just...
I can definitely see that that's there. And I know a lot of people say that that's part of hockey. And I didn't play hockey other than just pickup. I never played it, at a high level. And some people say that's part of the game. I think that in the NFL, they punish fighting very, very strictly.
We just had a fight at the Bills game like 2 weeks ago.
We did, but that's pretty rare, though. I mean, that's not really. I don't think that any football player says that's part of the game. The way they do with hockey, and they come down on those players pretty hard and kick them out and get them and fine them. I think that in those physical sports, what you're talking about definitely occurs. But I think at its best, I get philosophical about this. I think that happens within the rules of the game. So like when your player gets laid out, then you want to be physical with that other player, but you want to do it within the rules of the game. You don't want to chop block him. You don't want to fight him. You want to just be super physical, double team. And there's ways. I mean, I hear football players say there's ways when somebody's coming across the middle, you got their number, you know what they did last time you played, and there's ways to really put the hammer on them. And that's brutal. That's brutal, but it's within the rules of the game. And I think that that's where sport is at its best, is when everything is within the rules of the game. Obviously, people go close to the line. You can't really take that out of sport because sport is competition. You're trying to do anything to get an edge. But I think at its most beautiful and at its best, you're doing it within the rules of the game and not going outside to committing penalties and the like.
I think I just have a different outlook of the whole sport itself. I view sport as a competition where we're all trying to win. And as a team, sometimes winning for me is being a good teammate. And sometimes it's more about winning and overcoming as a team together than as an individual. And the rules of the sport be damned, we're going to look out for each other, because that's where all sports come from, is that just that desire to exude dominance that we all feel, kind of. That we all feel for real.
Yeah, I can see that why people say that that's a part of the game, and I can also see, hockey players will say that they need to police the sport because if somebody goes after with somebody with a stick, then they're going to have to stand up to a bigger, tougher guy and pay a price for that. And some hockey players will say that helps keep the game safer. I don't know that I buy it, though, because once you start to do that, you get some really ugly things. Like you get the Bertuzzi incident where he came and sucker punched somebody from behind, somebody who had put a hit or done something. I forget what it was. So once you get into this retaliation thing, you open up some ugliness in the sport. I think that's my personal opinion. I know, I've never done a combat sport other than fencing is just really a simulation.
It's a combat sport.
Yeah,
I would say it's a combat sport.
Perhaps, but I recognize the difference, though. I mean, I took a little bit of karate a long time ago. I mean, just a little bit. Like I was a yellow belt, I think. I mean, just a little bit, but enough that I did see it. I did see the difference between the physicality. I can remember our sensei put us in a closet one time, and they're like, "Holy mackerel!" I mean,
put your foot in the tire, don't move.
Oh man,
the boxing drill where you both put your foot in the tire and you don't move. You just fight the whole round with your foot in the tire and just hit each other.
That's one of the things we probably do agree on. Is I think one of the most beautiful things about sport is what it brings out of you. I'm telling myself, hey, I'm going to try to lose some weight, and I go and I ride a bike or I do some running or something like that. But nothing drives me like competition. Nothing drives me like being on the strip fencing. And that experience when I was in that karate class, I can remember being in that closet, and I could not believe how exhausted I was after 3 minutes of that. unbelievable, like just unbelievable exertion. And that's a beautiful thing about, sport challenges you for that. That feeling, you don't get that feeling anywhere else.
No, I think as human beings, we're designed to feel that too, and I think people that aren't kind of missing out on life. It's an easy way to get rid of your frustrations too.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a very good fencer, and I'll change the topic just a little bit. I'm a really mediocre fencer if you talk about competitive fencers, but I'm pretty decent for a local club fencer, or was. But there've been times that I've had touches where it was so perfect. It was the way you train. It was a delicate little touch, like just out fencing the other person. And the feeling that I've had the handful of times, and not even a lot of times, but sometimes when it has been so perfect, I think to myself, I don't think that Michael Jordan felt any differently after a great play. I think that's what it feels like. Now, obviously, I've never lifted the Stanley Cup or anything like that, but that excellence, that outperforming another person at a high level, that's a feeling that I've never had anywhere else. And I'm glad I've had it in my life, even though, I'm not a great athlete, but I've been enough of an athlete that I've experienced that. And maybe a lot of people haven't, and it's a great feeling.
I think it's a great feeling as well. I mean, I can't describe what it feels like to win an MMA fight or a kickboxing match or, even a wrestling match, to be honest with you. It's a great feeling. And I think everyone should at least give sports a try to feel that.
Yeah.
It's hard to even put into words like how that feels to me. I mean, that's the whole thing that drives you to do like 3 months of hard training camp, hating your life, watching everything you eat or drink put into your body. You watch me cut like 13 pounds off in like 2 days to make weight.
Well, this is a podcast, so you've been saying that I look like I dropped some weight, but, this guy, you right here, you're the real deal. You are a chiseled man.
Yeah, with 2 sweaters on right now because it's wintertime and I don't have any fat to keep me warm.
Yeah, but you've worked very hard. Yeah.
It's tough to be 41 and compete.
I'll bet, yeah.
Speaking of age and slowing down a little bit, how much does physical ability play into fencing? Is it more skill and technique and timing, or is there a point where when you start to get a little bit slower, you're not going to be able to perform as well?
Definitely, there's a drop-off over time. At the highest levels of fencing, it's a young person sport, definitely. It probably fencers hang on a little longer than most sports because it does reward wiliness so much. So it's not uncommon to see an Olympic fencer in the late 30s or 40, 42, but not older than that. That's pretty rare. But we did have, I think, the épée in the last Olympics was, I think, like a 22-year-old against something like a 39-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was kind of sad. The old guy was ahead by like 5 touches or 4 touches at the very end and lost them all. And he only needed 1 touch to win.
Oh.
And he lost like 5 in a row to the young guy, and so he never got his gold medal. And, he's an older guy, so he'll probably never be back. So
that's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. It was a beautiful bout to watch the highlights of, and it was really tough, especially as an older guy, to see. Here's somebody that at about 40. I'm 51 now. See somebody who at about 40 achieved. He was on the gold medal strip in the Olympics. He wins that. He gets 1 more touch. He wins the gold medal. It's a culmination of his entire life, and he couldn't do it. And the young guy won. It was great.
Tough. That's the recurring theme lately. But the old guys have been winning lately in MMA.
No, that's good. That's good.
So the old guys are starting to come back. So I don't know. I would say that I feel like my timing is better than it's ever been. Like I see things better, so my timing's better as I'm getting older. I've noticed my physical ability is a little bit slower. Like my footwork to get to position is slower, but I'm starting earlier, so I feel like I really haven't lost too much of a step. I feel like my timing's a lot better than it ever was. So I could see in a sport where, maybe there's less, like in wrestling, there's less scrambles or jiu-jitsu, MMA, where the guy shoots in on your legs, he's trying to grab your leg and take you to the ground, and you're doing all kinds of different positions to escape him and get back up, where it matters whether you're young or old and how flexible your knees are and all that stuff. But I feel like in a sport like fencing, like probably like 32 to 39 is probably when you're starting to be right into your prime almost.
I think most of the very best fencers are still in their 20s and not so much into their 30s, but they don't lose a lot. So there's a lot of fencers that are still successful in their 30s. That's true. And then at a club level, people fence into their 60s and even 70s. It's a rewarding sport. I mean, because it's hard work. It's kind of like, but it's not brutal work. So it's a combat sport, but you don't get beat up. So you can
You
do
would
it,
be
you can
if
do
you
it for a
didn't have
long
the
time.
safety stuff on, though.
You
Just
would-
think about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In fact, it's really important to always put it on, because you might think you get used to it, and there have been times like sometimes you do it for years and you don't remember sometimes how dangerous it would be. Just you're carrying a point and he's carrying a point, and sure, it's blunt, but if you don't have that mask on and you walk toward each other, and you could easily have an eye put out.
You put out his eye.
Yeah, you got it. You really do want to be disciplined about making sure you always put the mask on, and always. That's the most important thing. Always put the mask on when you are, coming into proximity with a weapon. Sometimes after a bout, people take a mask off and they're walking around, but they're holding these things still. You're like, you might want to not be. They're kind of at eye level when you're holding this thing. You might hold it down, and the weapon is up against your shoulder, kind of like a rifle is. Well, it's kind of eye level. It's not like it's a super dangerous sport, but you do wear safety equipment for a reason, and it's important. It's important to make sure you have it on.
Awesome, man. You gotta get. Did you ever watch Highlander?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what when you said that, all I could think of is from the TV show, the way Duncan MacLeod always holds his sword just like that.
Yeah,
it was like they're always up, like the blade was always up to him. I was always like, man, if someone just touched him.
That's the other one. There's Star Wars. Star Wars,
Yep.
Princess Bride, and Highlander are they're famous among fencers. Everybody loves that. I think Princess Bride is the biggest one. I am not left-handed either. Is you hear that all the time.
You're like a work of art. I would not destroy you, thonk. Yeah, that was great. We were just talking about that the other day. Me and I don't even remember who, but we were just talking about the sword fight scene. It's just awesome. Everyone knows that scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge for sword fighting. So you watched the TV show Highlander or the movie Highlander?
I watched. There was the movie. That was the one from a long time ago. I don't think I've seen the TV show.
Yeah, I have all the DVDs downstairs, man. I love that show. I was like addicted to it because they had lots of sword fighting in it, and you could tell the actors didn't really know how to fight with swords, but they did 7 seasons, so by the end they had that shit down. He was able to fence pretty well.
Yeah,
there were some really good sword fights by the end of the run of the show.
Yeah, there are Hollywood choreographers that will teach how to do the movie sword fighting. I understand that that's a little mini industry out there, is to make sure that actors can manage a sword fighting scene for movies like Zorro and Highlander and stuff like that.
Yeah, they got to make it good. Zorro, when I was a kid, I used to love Zorro because I didn't have cable, so I didn't have any cool shows to watch. And I grew up kind of watching old Zorro stuff, so I like that a lot.
No wonder you're a fighter.
I know.
Yeah.
I should have been a sword fighter. Good thing I didn't find fencing. And I found wrestling at 8 instead of fencing, or I'd probably be a fencer somewhere.
So you've been fighting your whole life then? You found wrestling at 8, and you've been doing it ever since?
I didn't really have a dad. My dad wasn't really around in the picture. I mean, he's back in my life now, but him and my mom split, and so I didn't have a dad growing up. And then I found wrestling, and the coaches gave me so much. It was like having a positive male role figure, and I just fell in love with the sport. I was kind of like induced in. Wrestling's another culture that's kind of like a gang mentality. You could just get in there and grind and grind and grind, and that's your family, and you cut weight together, and it's just a really positive experience.
I think wrestling is really awesome, personally. I've never wrestled, but to me, wrestling is one of those pure sports. I think fencing is up there too. There are certain sports that I think are just beautiful sports. I think soccer is one. I think fencing is one. I think wrestling is one. It's so pure. It's got rules to it, but it's just one-on-one combat. I think it's really an amazing sport, and it does have quite a following. I remember if you go to a tournament, like I went to the Florida State games a long time ago I guess it was in the 90s, and there were probably 40 spectators watching fencing, and they were all family members. And then right past a divider there was this mat for wrestling, and there were probably 500 people, and they were screaming and hollering. So wrestling is cool.
You're probably the only person that thinks wrestling's a spectator sport, like amateur wrestling, not like the pro wrestling. Because there's we saw NCAAs, but that's about the best. When I wrestled in high school, there's probably like 80 people,
Yeah.
And then there's 800 people for football and basketball. But
that's a big deal where I come from. Yeah. So when you were 8 years old, and you remember what that felt like? I mean, to be exposed to wrestling and then you fell in love with it.
I remember getting beat up a lot, and then I finally went to wrestling, and I was a little kid, like the 8-year-olds my size the other 8-year-olds, not my size, the other 8-year-olds were much bigger than me usually. So I got pushed around a lot. And then I found wrestling. I could finally get my hands on someone close to my own size. And even though he was better than me, it was an amazing experience. And then the coach was kind of tough, but he was like an old school coach, and I don't know, at that time I was I don't know, I was looking for a male role figure, really. I didn't even know what it was supposed to be like. I just saw it on TV, and he was a stereotypical old school coach, and I just fell in love with Coach Esslinger, and then ever since then, I love wrestling, and I got into it, and then I got good, and then I was able to beat people up, and it was fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then I broke a kid's ribs, and we weren't allowed to wrestle in school anymore. There was a great
was
story.
that was in a sanctioned competition?
No, it was in gym class.
In gym class, gotcha.
So, like, I got good at wrestling, and I was 8, and I was still kind of a bully. I didn't really know how to. I just kind of internalized everything and let people pick on me. I didn't really understand that you're supposed to stand up for yourself, because my mom was like, don't get in trouble, don't get in fights, you'll be in trouble, and I was scared of my mom, of course. So I'd never do anything to get in trouble at home. I'd rather get beat up than have my mom yell at me, because my mom was like the scariest thing in my life at times. And so we were wrestling, and this kid that picked on me all the time, like every day, bullied me, used to flick me in the ear, did all kinds of stuff. We got to go to wrestling in gym class. It was just regular gym class wrestling. So I just scooped him up with a double leg, and I came down and buried my shoulder right in his ribs, and I busted his rib.
Oh, man.
That was the coolest thing ever.
Was that? Did you get your ear flicked after that, or was that the end of that?
That was the end of that.
Yeah.
Then he tried to. I got in trouble for. I forgot I got in trouble for it, but it was. And then they didn't let us wrestle in gym class anymore. So now wrestling was only wrestling.
What'd your coach tell you? Did he know about that?
He was the gym teacher, so
so he knew about it.
He smiled. He liked it.
Yeah,
he didn't really care. Yeah. He said it was a great double.
Yeah, that's good. When they teach you wrestling, are there like rituals? Like, I mean, in fencing we salute an opponent. I think when I've watched wrestling, you shake hands, and I mean, I'm sure that wrestlers are taught, respect for the mat, respect for the opponent. I mean, It's probably pretty similar. Is there a ritual like that?
Not in freestyle, like international wrestling. You open up, and the ref makes sure you're not sweating, and you pull out your blood rag, make sure you have your blood rag, and you put it back in, and you go.
Blood rag?
Yeah, in case you're bleeding.
That sounds terrible. You ever
clean your own blood?
Really?
Yeah.
Really? You have to go into the mat with a blood rag?
Yeah, like, wow. No, it's just international, not in high school. In high school,
no.
Now they got trainers and everything, but that's how it was in the day.
Because just in case you start to bleed, and you got to show that you're prepared. Man, they see fencing. Fencing is a totally different thing, because they'll feel inside your jacket to make sure you're wearing a chest protector underneath there, and you don't have to have a blood rag in fencing.
Well, in wrestling, you're getting hit in the nose a lot, and if you're leading with your head like you're supposed to. Because you should hit with your forehead, because if you have your head bent over, it's bad for your neck. You want to be hitting them like forehead first. So if you got a big nose like me, obviously you're going to break it a bunch of times, run into someone's chest. And I broke my nose a bunch of times actually wrestling. Yeah. So I broke my nose.
So that's from wrestling.
I probably broke my nose wrestling more than I have fighting, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I've been fighting since 1995. So.
I heard that people get used to that.
Yeah.
Is that true? You get used to having your nose broken?
I guess. I mean, I can break my nose now.
I can hardly imagine it.
I mean, I can move my nose all the way around. It's not very. This whole septum is blocked off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so good. Like right now,
interesting
I look forward to getting hit, because when I get hit, it flattens out my nose a little bit, and this side drains, because right now it's totally filled up. So when I get hit, it opens up that septum a little bit, and all the snot can come out, and then I can breathe like a normal person for a couple of days.
Oh man!
Till the swelling goes down and heals back up.
Oh man! Yeah, that's a different world.
Yeah, great injuries, and then you gotta get some cool ears like this,
Yeah,
Those cauliflower ears going on.
Yeah. That's wild.
That's all from jiu-jitsu, those cauliflower ears. I never really got cauliflower ear wrestling.
Headlocks, is that what that's from?
Yeah, there's a technique called a triangle choke, and I'm pretty known for getting stuck in a triangle choke. So they put their legs like this around your head, and you have one arm stuck in there, and basically they're trying to put you to sleep with it. So I was really good at ripping my head out, and that's how I started getting cauliflower ear, because I'm really hard to choke, and I just shuck off the triangle choke, and it scrapes on your ear. Yeah. And that's how I got my ears pretty jacked up.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. That's a tough business. That's a tough sport. That's cool though. That's cool.
I think you like it. It's very, very technical. Like Jiu-jitsu without punching and kicking is super, super technical. And, I mean, we have older guys at the gym that train. I know a guy, I don't know, Schuster looks like he's 102, but he's got to be in his 60s, and he's training.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
That's cool. I might come by and at least see it. I wanted to do that, actually. I wanted to come by your gym and at least watch it. I mean, I think I'd actually hurt myself. If I don't think I have flexibility. I think I'd actually hurt myself to give it a try. But I'll come by and I'll take a look at it.
Yeah,
I'd like to
for
do
sure,
that.
man. Western New York MMA.
Yeah.
We're right over on Great Arrow, man.
Yeah.
Come be my guest. I'll get you a class or two.
All right.
I'll hook you up.
One of the things that I read about wrestling, which is I think really fascinating, is that when people discuss with it, well, you see all these videos about these karate or styles of karate and how there's this mystical. This mysticism sometimes around the style that this master can't be hurt, or but once they actually get into the ring, it's jiu-jitsu, I believe, is the technique that takes them all down. That when it becomes a sport, when it becomes real, when it becomes there's not rules about the form, but we're just gonna go at one another and make the other guy submit. That then you get a lot of the styles go out the window and you go to ground.
Right. Yeah, that's what happens a lot.
Yeah. Fencing had something that's a little bit similar happen a while ago. It used to be that fencing was in that older style with the hand was up in the air and they were kind of dancing down the strip at one another. And then apparently, I think it was sometimes like in the 70s or early 80s, some cats figured out that you could just go for it. You could just the whole point was not the tradition of attack and defend and parry and advance up the strip, but the whole point was merely to touch the other person before they touch you. And that when you made it an athletic contest, some people argued it took some of the beauty out of the sport. And I think maybe with MMA, maybe some people feel like some of the forms of karate, like I'd imagine Taekwondo doesn't work inside. All
right. Finish your thought, and I'll go into a whole spiel.
Okay.
For you.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things I do love about these combat sports is when they're not just practice, when they're actually, fencing is one that there's rules to it, but when it is a sport contest. You are trying to touch the other person before they touch you, and so it doesn't always resemble what's in the books and the diagrams. And that's, to me, when it really gets brilliant, is when it's stretching itself to become something that's different and super aggressive and super athletic. And when I see Olympic fencers, it's just beautiful to see what they're capable of doing.
Right. So to go to the MMA aspect of that, in 1993, UFC started, and they had karate guys and kung fu guys and street fighter guys, and they tried to represent every art. And they had this skinny little Brazilian guy, Royce Gracie. They actually put him in his older brother, Hickson, was this huge jack guy, but they put Royce in because he's smaller and he just looks like a regular dude. He's like 180 pounds. And he went in there and he choked out all these karate guys, kung fu guys, actual real kickboxers. And over the course of a few UFCs, they figured out that almost every fight ends up on the ground. About 90% of the fights end up on the ground. And then everyone started learning jiu-jitsu. And then once people started learning some of the basic defenses to jiu-jitsu, then striking started taking over again. So you have really good kickboxers that are able to not get choked out, that could knock people out.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Then wrestlers decided to get involved in the game. And then wrestlers started taking everybody down, and they just beat you up and headbutt you. Then they made headbutts illegal. Then jiu-jitsu guys started to learn a little bit of striking, and everybody learned jiu-jitsu. So now everyone is kind of athletic. And now that everyone's really athletic, now you see super athletes like John Jones and, NFL caliber type athletes in UFC. Actually, people that didn't make the NFL or get cut from teams going to UFC as well. Now you have total athletes, and now they're picking up the traditional martial arts again. You see them throwing like Taekwondo kicks and spinning kicks, and they've done more than just that classic Thai boxing. They're putting in karate, and there was a great UFC champion, Lyoto Machida, who was basically just a karate guy with a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And he'd pop in like almost like fencing style, crack you and put you to sleep.
Is that so? Like that suddenly, like that's a strategy. Is you don't necessarily have to grapple somebody, but you get in and you strike them. Boom, that's it. They're down.
If you watch UFC, there's a lot less grappling than there was in the old days. Now I'd say there's a lot more fights that are all contested on the feet, or when it hits the ground, they're both just kind of holding on to each other. Because now you have two experts on the ground. They both know what's going on, so it's very hard to submit. In the old days, it'd be like a black belt in jiu-jitsu against somebody that maybe never been on the ground before and didn't even know what to look for. Now everyone's well-versed in everything, so now it's just like an athletic contest. And to me, it's better than it's ever been, but it's a little oversaturated with how many fights there are.
That's cool, though. Yeah, that's the evolution of that. When the rules change, obviously, a little bit, but that evolution, that the only thing that really matters is, making the other person submit or knocking them out. That's that makes the sport, and going back to my thoughts a little bit about sports, makes it pure. The result is obvious. One person makes the other person submit, and I hope that guys aren't getting hurt and having lifelong injuries and stuff like that. I hope that the sport's able to keep people pretty healthy. But it's a special sport. I can tell.
Yeah, now there's weight cutting, because originally there's no weight classes, so everyone just fought everyone. That's how it was when I started. No weight classes, no gloves, just you go in there. Groin strikes were legal. It was really pure. It was a fight. Now it's more of an athletic contest. This is a sport. I would say it may be more dangerous than it used to be, but I think that it's definitely much more enjoyable to watch. It's more of a spectator sport because you got two athletes really smacking the hell out of each other. The only thing that makes it more dangerous is the weight cutting, because these guys are cutting 15, 20, 30 pounds, and then they're fighting the next day. And some of them are having kidney failure and their organs shut down. That's a dangerous part of the sport.
I've heard that they're trying to crack down on that in high schools and colleges and stuff, because you get kids that are doing this, and they don't necessarily appreciate the risks they're doing to their bodies.
Yeah, wrestling went to hydration testing. So now in high school and college wrestling, they test your hydration level at the start of the season, and they tell you what's the lowest weight class you can go to, and you can't go below that weight class. It doesn't matter what you weigh. That's the lowest weight class you can wrestle at. So they have hydration testing, and do it again at the end of mid-season, and you can only wrestle what you can get certified for.
That's cool.
So that's the way that I think most of the sports should be.
It's probably more fair that way too. I mean, really. I mean, the idea of weight classes is to make things fair. So, set the rules so that they're fair, and don't let people, don't encourage people to put themselves in harm's way to make a weight class. That's a pretty good idea.
Well, you're incentivized to get as low as you can, so you're the bigger guy in the weight class, and you're more bigger and dominant. So you see guys that probably walk around 190 can make it down to 55. Some of them make it down to 40. Like Conor McGregor can walk around 185, and he started out at 145,
You're kidding me. Wow.
No.
Wow.
And those guys get down to 70 the week before, so it's all water weight. So when you lose that much water weight, you put that much water weight back on when you fill your body back up.
Yeah.
And, man, there can be some big dudes. It's a scary thing sometimes.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So you would probably, what do you weigh?
Right now I weigh 210.
Yeah, so we'd probably get you down to 170 to fight.
Yeah, that would. Yeah, when I was at my best, I was about 172 when I was in the Navy, and I felt pretty good. And I could go lower than that. I should, really. I mean, you look at a body mass index thing for me, and I'm supposed to be around 160, 165. So, yeah.
Yeah. I lost 24 pounds in 8 hours before. Wow. That's the most I ever did. That was pretty bad. I thought I was going to die that time.
Wow.
I was shaking. I almost passed out on the scale.
And
then I had to wrestle 2 hours after I weighed in. That was brutal. That wasn't even for a fight. It was just for wrestling. For fun. I
met a guy here in Buffalo who was the second alternate for the U.S. boxing team in 1976.
Oh, yeah?
He fought with Russell... Oh, I'm going to forget his last name. Can't believe it.
Thompson?
Nope.
Not Russ Thompson?
Nope. Shoot. He was a... Man. And the unfortunate thing is they take one alternate to the Olympic team. This was Sugar Ray Leonard and Leon Spinks, and he describes... oh, man, I wish I could remember his last name. I'll email it to you. I'll find it.
All right.
Yeah. And I met him at work, and really, really nice, humble guy. And still, I mean, he's when he told me, how old he was, he was 60 something, and I mean, he looked 50, and he still works out. But he talked about boxing, but I guess you were talking about these big guys, and he was talking about being so good. I mean, can you imagine being that good? You could have gone to the Olympics, but then he said, "Yeah, but the Spinks boy, they could really hurt you." And he said when he got this wistful look in his eye when he was talking about it and what could have been, and then he said, "Yeah, but when I forget if it was Leon or Michael Spinks fought the Cuban, and I think the American won, but they beat each other up bad." And he was saying strength matters so much. I was a little surprised because I was having the kind of same conversation with him. I said, "Oh, fencing is all timing and distance," and he said, "Yeah, but in boxing, strength." He said these guys, the Spinks brothers, they were so strong, they could hit so hard. Yeah. Anyway,
boxers can do a lot of damage in just a little bit of space.
Yeah. And he had sparred these guys. I mean, so that's his claim to fame. He had been a very good boxer, and he had trained with the Olympic team, and he had fought Leon and Michael Spinks and got beat up pretty good with them when they were sparring. Apparently, it's a tough business, man.
Take a lot of head damage too. I trained with some a guy that was about to turn pro in boxing. They spar like 3 times a week, and I don't know. Do you know who James Toney is?
I don't.
He was a heavyweight boxer. He fought for a title a bunch of times. He was really good. We had him on this podcast before, and me and my co-host Ray, he usually sits where you're sitting. We're interviewing this guy over the phone, and we can't even understand what he's saying. Like his,
man.
you can't like. First of all, like, no offense, but he's a black guy and he speaks Ebonics, so we're already a little bit short trying to talk with him. Ray's like Mexican, so he's pretty good on the street lingo. But he was so garbled when he was talking.
Yeah.
And dude, that was probably our most highest ranked podcast. We got like I think we got 5,600 hits on it now.
Oh man,
and
that's cool.
Like people listen to it, but
you blast right through that talking about fencing here with this guy.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna be over 10,000 hits for sure. And so I can look on the computer when I post it and see how long people listen to it. I have like over 5,000 hits where people listen to it for about 3.5 minutes.
That's funny.
And so, like, he starts talking about 3 minutes in because we do our intro and then we introduce him and and I'm looking at Ray, dude. I'm like writing down on the thing. I can't understand what he's saying. So it was just a horrible podcast. But what I think happened is everyone listened to him talk and then they're just like messaging each other and they're like, listen to this guy, dude. He can't even talk anymore.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Some serious damage happens to these guys.
Yeah.
It's hard to retire, though. I know the feeling. Got anything else, man? You want to plug the club again? Oh, I got one more question for you, actually, that I was thinking about, and I forgot. Now I just remembered. How many competitions are there for fencing? Because I've never really seen like fencing advertised anywhere, and I'm around a lot of like small gyms and UB a lot for some of the wrestling and jiu-jitsu stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very small. There are a number. If a person wants to fence competitively, you're probably going to get 6 or 8 tournaments throughout the year that are either here in Buffalo or in Rochester, probably. But the only people that know about them are fencers and their wives.
That bad, huh?
Yeah, it's really seriously fencers attend. There is a really good club over in Rochester, the Rochester Fencing Club, that is run by a former Olympian. The Zimmerman sisters, I don't know if both sisters are still running the club or not, but they're the most serious club here in Western New York, and they host some competitions over there at their facility. But there's a handful throughout the year that are hosted. But the only people that show up to these things it's really unfortunate that you really only get fencers. It's just not much of a spectator sport. If it wasn't for the Olympics, I don't know how many people would watch fencing. We're pretty fortunate that it's cool. People like fencing, and it stays an Olympic sport. It is tough to watch. It's hard to see the action. You kind of have to know the rules. So if anybody is watching it, I highly recommend you get something that's got a replay. It's got something in slow motion so that you can really see what goes on, because it can be kind of frustrating otherwise. You watch what happens. 2 fencers come together. One of them screams because he's happy. One of them screams because he's mad, and you don't really know what happened. But then if you see the replay and you can see that one blocked the other person and then hit, that's fun. But it's a tough spectator sport. I mean, for myself, it's tough to watch live and know all the action that's happening.
If there's one close, you should message me. I'd love to go check one out.
Okay, all right, I'll do that.
And then
Yeah.
we'll go check it out. How much are they to get in? Are like $50 since no one comes? Gotta raise the prices to get in.
I think we got to start paying people to go. They are of course free. I mean, if there was any single one person that showed up at one of these little tournaments that wasn't actually a fencer or like drove a fencer there, it would be, a pretty spectacular thing. So
Wow, maybe I shouldn't go. My rep's going to go down.
Yeah, right.
What do you do? Oh, I fight professionally. Okay.
Yeah. No, you would enjoy seeing a fencing competition.
I think I'd be able to see what's
Yeah.
going on too. Like I'm used to such a high speed, like jabbing and punching, and professional fighters, they move very fast too. I'm pretty good at picking stuff up. I really enjoy to watch the footwork, I think.
Yeah, I'll find where there's something local. The best thing that you'd see is be probably one of these ones in Rochester. Drive you over there if you wanted to see that. But that's a hike. Don't have to do that. I'll find something local for you that you can watch too.
And I'll get you into a fight. I do commentary for Ground Force Fights, man. I'll get you tickets to a fight.
Okay,
That'll be on me.
All right,
Take out Rich Mitchell. I need a comp ticket. All right. Got anything else, man?
No, man. Thanks.
All right, we did an
hour
and 10 minutes. It's pretty good.
All right.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming over, man. I appreciate it. I got to get a picture of you so I can get it posted when we do it.
All right.
And we're out. Caveman's Corner's out of here. We don't have raid today, so we're gone. That wasn't too bad.
That was fun. Yeah.
Really
I hope it goes well for you. I mean, I thank you. It's a pleasure for me to talk about fencing, and it's a real nice for me to be able to plug the club because I mean, fencers come in. We get people at college because there'll be clubs like UB will have a club or somebody will be familiar with it from that. But then if you're not in college, what do you do? And so that's how we usually get somebody that'll come into the club. But it's not a real popular sport, unfortunately. It's always nice to they put a demo on at the Elmwood Arts Festival, and usually